Teruvan Saranai, everyone. Let's begin the Dhamma discussion. As I promised, I will try to do at least 2 every month, and this is the first one for 2023. In this discussion, we will talk about Nibbhana or Nirvana or the enlightenment. So for that, we need to understand what the fires are, or Gini, in other words. So in order to get rid of the fire, you need to understand the fire. So this is very important, because as long as you are burning, you're suffering. When I say burning, it's a burning in your heart, it's a burning in your mind, it's a burning inside. But sometimes it doesn't feel like it's a burn until you see it, until you start seeing it clearly. So for example, when you try to I'll give you a simple example. When you start cleaning a room, that's when you start seeing all the dirt. If you don't even think about cleaning the room, you won't see any dirt. So similarly, when you start looking at your mind, looking at your actions, looking at your activities very clearly, that's when you see the burning of your mind, of the suffering. We are all suffering, I'm sure you understand that, but we suffer on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-to-minute basis, but we only see that if we focus clearly on what we are doing, and if we start seeing it very clearly. So the reason for this suffering is the 6 senses. So in the life, what we a mundane person, what he or she does is we take things from the outside world to the inside world. So if we say the inner world is the 6 senses, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body and the mind, and from the outside world, which is the visions, the sounds, the smell, the taste, the touch and the thoughts. So these are the 2 worlds that anyone lives in. There's nothing apart from that. So anything falls under these 2, either the inner world, which we call me or my, me basically, and the outer world is normally we try to call it mine, and the rest of the world basically. So what we do is we try to fulfill the 6 senses. That's what we do. We think the objective of every human is to become happy. But unfortunately, the way they become happy is by trying to fulfill the senses. Not fulfilling, because you can't fulfill. They think they can fulfill. So let's look at this. So in the past, we believe that we came through a long journey of samsara. So if we were coming through this very long journey, have we ever fulfilled our eye with the visions? Or are we still looking outside, trying to fulfill the eye? Have we at least fulfilled it 1% in this journey? Similarly, have we fulfilled the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind? No. We haven't fulfilled at even 1%. In this life, we have seen so many things. We have tried to fulfill the I so many times, but have we fulfilled at least 1%? No. Have we fulfilled any of the 6 senses, even 1%? Or any amount? No. So do you think in the future we will be able to fulfill the senses, even 1%? No. So this process of trying to fulfill the senses is a worthless, it's a useless process. It's just making you tired, and it doesn't give you anything. But we keep doing it. Why? The reason is this. What happens is, this is where we understand the fire or the burning that we create ourselves. The burning is something that we create ourselves. It's not outside. This is something that you need to understand too. So, how do we create the burning? Say, for example, you're walking by and you see a nice house, and then you want to you create some sort of craving inside you to buy that house. You need to see this very carefully in order to understand, right? So you create this craving. The moment you create this craving, you think, wow, this is such a wonderful house. So that's how we tend to think. A mundane person tend to think, oh, such a wonderful house. I wish I had this house. So now what you're thinking is, you're thinking in the future, having the house and becoming happy because of the house. But you don't see the craving and the burning and the suffering that you created yourself with this attachment that you just had. So with this house, you created an attachment, you created a craving, and this is very deep, and this is very strong, and this is a burning. This is the first type of suffering that you created with regards to this attachment that you created right now. So it's called the Sankhara Dukkha. So in order for you to get the house, you need to work for it. The house is not going to come to you. You need to work for it. You need to earn more money. You need to save more money. You need to sacrifice other things such as holidays, what you eat, what you do, your time maybe. And you need to save money to buy the house. So you're working for it. Say you worked for it for a couple of years. So all this time what you did was you suffered because of this craving that you created. And then imagine after 2 years you have the money. Now you have enough money to buy the house. Maybe you want to pay half now and then pay the rest in the next 10 years or so. If that's the case, then you will have a mortgage, which is another burden, which is another pain, which is another suffering and a burning. But even if there is no mortgage, we'll think, okay, we'll assume we have all the money and we buy the house. The moment you buy the house, you create another suffering, which is called the dukkha. This is the suffering that you created because of the suffering you just had. That's why it's called the dukkha. Dukkha is suffering. What happens is the moment you buy the house, it becomes yours in your mind. So once it becomes yours, now you got to protect it from thieves, you got to protect it from outsiders. So you got to make sure it's protected, right? So now you have to protect something that you didn't have before. You didn't have to protect this house before this, but the moment you sign the contract, the moment you sign the agreement, now you got to start protecting this. This applies to anything. This applies to anything. You buy a car, you marry a nice lady, or you give birth to a child. So anything. And then the next is, from that day you create another suffering which is called the viparinama dukkha. Viparinama dukkha is the changes that happen to this, but the changes that you don't like. For example, the house depreciates. It's not gonna stay in the same value. It's not gonna. The paint is gonna depreciate. The roof is gonna wear and tear. The everything, the carpets in the house, or the windows, anything. So any changes that you don't like that happen to this particular thing will make you suffer. So these are 3 sufferings that you created because of just one craving, one thought, one attachment. So this is what happens when we create an attachment to anything. Say for example, a boy goes outside, goes for a walk, and then sees a nice young girl, and then he wants to become friends, or become her boyfriend, or wants to have her as his girlfriend. Then you have to work for it. It's not going to be easy. You have to do certain things and work for it. So that creates the sankhara dukkha. Then the moment you get engaged or become boyfriend and girlfriend, then you create the dukkha. Now you got to make sure you protect, and then viparinama, you need to make sure that person doesn't change the way you don't like. So it applies to anything, but the important thing is you need to understand the 3 sufferings that you created just because of one craving that you had. So that is what Trishna can do to you. So Tanha, Trishna, Raga, these are all the same. Raga, so the attachment, the lustful feeling, the like, the desire, all these are called Raga. So Raga results in the suffering. So Dvesha, or in other words the hatred or aversion, is also a result of Raga. If there is no Raga, there is no Dvesha. And going behind this is the delusions, which is Moha. So Raga, Dvesha, Moha are the problems which we need to get rid of. But for us to get rid of them, you need to understand clearly how it works and the process, so that we can come out of them as and when they arise. So this is why we need to be mindful. This is why we need to see what's happening, what's going in our minds. So coming back to the example of the house, one might say, oh, but I was so happy when I bought the house. Yes. Let me explain how that works. The happiness was a result of releasing some other pressure, some other craving, some other sufferings that you created for yourself. So what you did was you created the suffering yourself with a house, thinking, okay, I need this house. And then you started suffering because of this house, to get the house, to buy the house. But now, after a while, you have created this strong suffering. Now, once you buy the house, what you're doing is you're releasing the suffering. Part of the suffering you're releasing. So that acts as if it's a happiness. Let me give you a very simple example. Say, for example, you're hungry. So once you eat, you become happy. So the hunger, getting rid of the hunger is what made you happy. So you created a hunger yourself to have this house. Now you got rid of the hunger and now you're happy. But you are the one who created the hunger. If the hunger wasn't there, there is no happiness. Say, for example, there is a person who doesn't want a house. He doesn't want a house. He lives in a different place, in a different country, say, and you give a house to him in a country that he never visits, and he doesn't want a house. You think he's going to be happy as the same as the other person who really wanted the house, who created the hunger, who created the craving, who created this like and desire? No. Because for the other person, it doesn't give him happiness, because it doesn't make any difference to that person's craving. And he hasn't created a hunger to get this house. So that is why he doesn't get the same happiness. So similarly, what we do is we create the hunger, we create the craving, we create the suffering ourselves. So we need to stop creating the suffering, which is, we need to stop creating these attachments. So this is where the problem is. So when we start seeing things, if we start creating attachments, then we start suffering from that moment. Say, for example, you walk by, you see a lot of cars passing by. You don't have any cravings or attachments to any of these cars. Do you suffer? No. But one car passes by. It's a nice car that you love to have in future. You see that, oh wow, this is the car that I want. This is the color, this is the make, the model, everything. Now you think, wow. And then what happens? You create a like, you create a desire, you create a craving, and from that moment of time, you start the suffering process. And then one day, when you buy, you think, I am really happy now. But how much have you suffered before you got rid of the suffering you created yourself? You created a suffering. Along with that came three other sufferings, three burnings, shall I say, or fires. Sankhara dukkha, viparinama dukkha, and dukkha dukkha. Now all these sufferings, and now you release some of the sufferings once you buy the car, and you say, wow, I'm so happy I bought the car. But now you have the dukkha dukkha, you have the sankhara dukkha and the viparinama dukkha still with you. So you're not releasing all the sufferings. You just created a huge suffering and you release some of it, and you see the happiness that come with that suffering by releasing that suffering. So that's how we spend our day-to-day life. So imagine you didn't have any suffering at all. If you did not create any suffering, the peace, the happiness that you will have. So that is what we are talking about. That is the Nibbhana. That is the real Nibbhana. So when you start seeing all these as fires or burnings and not let them come into you, then you will slowly get detached from the burnings. In other words, you'll get towards the Nibbhana, which is the Nirvana or the enlightenment. So this is how you get towards Nibbhana. If anyone has achieved dhyana or jhana, second jhana, third jhana or fourth jhana, you will understand how much of a tranquility you got at the time of the jhana. You didn't have any raga, you weren't attached to anything, you didn't have any dvesha, you didn't have any moha at the time. So without raga, dvesha and moha, you saw how tranquil it was. So it's the same thing. So when you get rid of all this raga, dvesha and moha, when you have no attachments, you detached from all the sufferings. Because these attachments are the fires, the burnings, the sufferings. You are attaching to a suffering, in other words. You think you're attaching to a car, you're attaching to a house, you're attaching to a person, you're attaching to your kids, to your family, but actually you're attaching to the suffering to do with that. Because the longer you're attached, the more you're attached, the more you suffer. So the more you detach from them. When I say detach, you need to understand the detachment or the attachment is to do with the mind. It doesn't mean that you leave everyone and go away. If you have a family, you live with the family. You do the duties and responsibilities, you take care of them. That's not the attachment I'm talking about. That is your duty. But the attachment is in the mind, in you. So as long as you're not mentally attached, you're not mentally suffering. The more you're mentally attached, the more you suffer mentally. So this is what you need to understand. Hope you grasped something out of this. So hopefully I will have another discussion during this month, by the end of this month, hopefully the last weekend. Until then, Nibbhana Paramasukhen Sukhittara Teruvan Sarnai.